Hey, this is your PowerPoint lecture to A Christmas Carol. Next are Rossetti poems. So, some of the context, just in case you are not up with the whole story, just bear in mind how familiar a Victorian audience would be with this story. The vast majority of people are Church of England and going to schools that are also church schools. Even if you weren't Church of England, you were Christian in some respect or other. There were other people, but the vast majority would be very familiar with this story. Okay. So this poem of Rossetti's was published in 1872, and this was a period of many carols being written. Hymns and hymn singing had only really taken off in the Church of England after the rise of Methodism. And Methodists, one of the things they did to really encourage people to come to church and have a good time was have hymns and hymn singing. And that was adopted into the Church of England, as were many things that the Methodists did. And having organs in the church is a Victorian tradition. And so lots of hymns were being written at this point, and lots of carols. The carols we still sing today were written in this period, not just this one, which we know as In the Bleak Midwinter. But also Once in Royal David's City was written in 1848, and O Little Town of Bethlehem was written in 1866. So the nativity story, nativity means birth, is only found in two of the Gospels. It's in the Gospels of Luke and Mark. I'm just going to go over the basics because they're mentioned in the poem. The baby Jesus is born to the Virgin Mary in a stable. Angels appear in the sky to some shepherds who then come to the stable and worship the baby. In the painting here, or maybe in the poem, there's a camel, but there's no camel in the story. But the idea was that the wise men came from the east. So that's why you sometimes get a camel in the story. But their gifts are named in the Bible story. The gifts they bring are gold, frankincense, and myrrh. There is a British folk story that animals kneel on Christmas Eve in the stables. I love that story. There's a Thomas Hardy poem that references that idea. Okay, so if you think about what the poem's about, what the actual basic content and plot of it is, the poem focuses on the miraculous but almost impossible idea of God becoming a child. Okay, so that's the big Christian story here. That's amazing. That's miraculous. God is the most powerful, omnipotent thing in the entire history of the world, and a baby is the most innocent, sweet, helpless thing there is. So the poem really interested in that contrast all the way through. Contrasts the splendour and power of God in heaven with the humble reality of life on earth. It's different from most carols in that the first stanza just sets the scene. It's just a winter poem. There's no reference to religious ideas in that first stanza. It's just the cold and the snow. Then the next three stanzas retell the nativity story. And this is a quote from someone writing about the poem. The heights of heavenly love and the ordinary human world are movingly combined. Okay. The final stanza brings in the first person perspective. So it's only in the final stanza that we get this I voice and the me. So that both the writer and the reader are challenged to respond to the birth of Christ today. Yeah, so as in a good Christian thing, you have the story from the Bible and then you go, what does this mean for us today? What do we need to do with our lives today? Remember that idea about Christina Rossetti being, when she's writing religious poetry, quite didactic sometimes and trying to teach a lesson, teach a moral Christian lesson. So in that first stanza, we get this daring repetition of snow. We say daring because it could just sound flat. You know, quite often when I'm doing creative writing with students, I'll sort of say, don't repeat the same word, try and think of a synonym. Okay, but Rossetti is a very accomplished writer, and so when she repeats a word, she's doing it on purpose. But that's what we call it daring. But it's the idea of snow falls on snow. Yeah, and if you don't live in snowy climes, but you can have snow still on the ground and then more snow falls on that snow. So that idea it's been a long, hard winter, which is also conveyed through the harsh sounding consonants in that opening stanza. The repetition of phrases throughout the poem creates a lyric sound, and from the second stanza on, you get religious diction. The final stanza opens with a question, and that question is only answered in the last line. So that is a nice structural technique. I'm just going to mention some of the harsh sounding consonants. So bleak with the K at the end, frosty, water, hard, bleak. Yeah, so when we talk about harsh sounding consonants, we're talking about, you know, not soft ones that be going in your mouth like that. Okay, so we have 5 8-line stanzas. The line lengths vary, but there are roughly 4 beats, 3 beats. Okay, so I'm just going to do this for you. Let's go for the second stanza. What we're looking for. 4 beats, 3 beats. Enough for him whom cherubim worship night and day. A breast full of milk, that's only 3, and a manger full of hay, that's 3 again. Enough for him whom angels fall down before, the ox and ass and camel which adore. So, you know, work out the beats yourself. It's not regular, but that is roughly how it goes. Our God, heaven cannot hold him, nor earth sustain. Heaven and earth shall flee away when he comes to reign. In the bleak mid-winter, a stable place sufficed, the Lord God Almighty, Jesus Christ. Okay, so the rhyme scheme goes A, B, C, B, D, E, F, E. So once again, only 2 rhyming words per stanza. The closing line brings a sudden stop, as if to enact the frozen stillness of the earth. Yeah, remember how you should try, if you're saying something about structure, try and link it to content. So there you go. The second and fourth stanzas alternate, the first 4 lines being about the glory of God, and then the second 4 are on the humility of his birthplace and earthly worshippers. So structure can be the whole structure of the whole poem, and then structure within stanzas. So we said about the content, it's this contrast between God in heaven and things on earth. That contrast happens within stanzas. Whereas in the third stanza, those ideas alternate every 2 lines. Some of the imagery in the poem, there are quite simple similes, iron and stone for frozen water and earth, but more symbolically, as well as frozen earth, it's the hardness and coldness of human hearts. Yeah, it's a hard world to which God sends his son, and possibly still, for Rossetti, still in her day. I was going to say still today. Yeah, I don't mean our today, I mean her today when she's writing the poem. You know, Rossetti knows it doesn't snow in Palestine. Yeah, people are often like sort of snooty about people from the past, like they thought it snowed. She knows it doesn't snow in Palestine, but she wanted to bring the poem home to the reader, to the British reader, and that would have that effect. That thing about a breast full of milk is referring to Mary as the mother of God, you know, literally the mother of God. She carried him in her womb, she gave birth to him, and then she breastfed him. Now that line caused a bit of embarrassment when the poem then became a popular carol. Rossetti didn't write it to be carol lyrics. She just wrote it as a poem, and then someone else set it to music. And, you know, you can imagine 11-year-old school children mentioning breasts, they all start to laugh and giggle. And so some places actually changed it so that they didn't have to say that word. And if you're not sure what cherubim and seraphim are, they're ranks of angels. So there are different kinds of angels, and you get thousands of them, and they're all attending God on his throne in heaven. So some of the themes in this poem, the centrality of Mary to this story. Okay, worshipping or really venerating the Virgin Mary was a feature of Roman Catholicism. Now, as we know, Christina Rossetti is not a Roman Catholic, she is a High Church Anglican. But this is one of the features that, you know, they started reintroducing back into the Church of England, giving Mary some prominence, giving Mary some worship. Yeah, and in this poem, Mary is made central. And this most miraculous, amazing thing she can do, she can sustain Jesus, who after all is God, with her own body. In contrast, she's contrasted to the angels. Only she can worship simply and naturally. Oh, there it says, worship of the Virgin Mary is central to Roman Catholicism, can be seen as an aspect of Rossetti's high church tendencies, but also may be a sign of her view of women's central role in Christianity. It links to other poems in its conclusion that the true Christian must give their heart to God, like in Twice.